Redditors who hired a private investigator, ... What? My wife and I are friends with a lot of bar owners and bartenders because of her job. We knew this one owner/tender. We will call him Dana. That was the nicest fucking guy. Like, if he knew you were sick, he would cover your shift at your bar and then give you the tips he made that night. Just the best guy. Then one night we are drinking with another bartender friend, Ben. Ben lets us know that Dana has brain cancer. He's been keeping it quiet, but Ben has been giving him money, upwards of $5,000, for treatment. My wife and I were about to give money to Ben to pass on. Then Dana's business partner got suspicious and hired a pie to follow Dana on a day. He took off for medical reasons. Turned out Dana spent the day drinking at another bar. No doctor visits. The business partner confront Dana, who comes clean. He didn't have cancer. He was just saying that to get money from his friends. Apparently lots of bartenders have been giving him money. Dana is more or less run out of town. He moved to a different city, and I know he slowly paid Ben back. But it took a couple years. I'm not sure what happens to him since. My mother's dad walked out on Mum, my aunt, and my grandmother when Mum was just 5. A few years later, my grandmother died of a grand mal seizure. Mum was taken in by her grandparents, but she always wondered why her dad left and what became of him. In her 40s, she saved up a bit and hired a pie to track him down. Turns out he moved over time from Pittsburgh to California, where he wound up in prison for armed robbery and so other violent crimes. He died in San Quentin Penitentiary. I think Mum got a lot of closure out of it. She was able to see that life would have most likely been even worse had he stayed, at least living with her grandparents. She was loved and raised to fulfill her potential. I know somebody who was like an assistant to the actual. She basically went to bingo with a camera in her purse to capture video of a woman. The woman claimed that a car accident completely immobilized her, but she would take off the neck brace all the time, playing bingo hours on end. Nothing exciting. Just capturing fraud. Not but my grandfather did. He was separated from his brother when the Japanese occupied China. My grandfather safely made it to Hong Kong and eventually to Canada. His brother made it to Singapore or Malaysia, according to family friends back then. So my grandfather spent a good 5 years or so working with a pie to find his brother, so they can be reunited, sadly with just a picture, and the fact many people died in the war. It wasn't much to go on. My grandfather is still alive and always thinks of his brother. It's his wish to see him one more time. In his 20s, Myself hired a pie to find out what had become of the childhood bully who had made his life hell, and who had vowed to kill him. Actually, he did try by bringing a loaded gun to school, but some other kid ratted him out. The bully got expelled, but still lived in the neighborhood for a few more years, beat up Myself every chance he got. The pie found the bully living in a town more than an hour outside the big city in a dead-end job. He'd been arrested for assault and public drunkenness a couple of times. That info helped Myself get past his fear that the guy would find him someday, make good on his threat. My grandmother's first boyfriend after my grandfather died saying he was a retired cop and a veteran. They enjoyed dancing to country music together and bought a new car, in her name though, even though she can't drive anymore. My uncles hired a pit. Turns out that old bastard had a habit of shacking up with widows and bleeding them dry. The boyfriend got the peer. Not a pie and haven't hired one, but I used to work in the office of a pie firm specializes in insurance fraud. I would edit and sometimes write surveillance and background investigation reports that we passed along to our clients, mostly lawyers and insurance companies. One thing that never failed to surprise me, an astounding number of people who claim to suffer devastating disabilities regularly post pictures/videos of themselves running marathons and building decks in their yards. I'm comfortable saying that in at least half of the cases I handled over 2 years, our clients flagged their claimants as fraudulent because of social media. Disgruntled exes are another significant source of tips. To give an example of one of the more remarkable instances in which social media saved a case, it's summer, and on the day of surveillance, our investigator sees the claimant and his family loading their car with beach stuff. The claimant drives for a couple of hours before the investigator eventually leaves his sight of the vehicle. Side note: tailing someone in a vehicle without one, arousing suspicion, or two, losing the vehicle is hard. The investigator, being way too far from his own home to drive home, checks into a motel. The next morning, he checks his phone and finds that the claimant checked in at a water park on Facebook. Investigator makes a pit stop to boot some swim trunks and a beach towel, drives to the water park, and gets hours of covered footage of the claimant swimming in a wave pool, going down water slides, picking up and putting down his kids, and generally doing a whole lot of things you probably shouldn't be able to do with a serious spine injury. Too long, don't read. If you're gonna commit insurance fraud. If you're gonna of social media. I used to work for an insurance defense firm years ago. Best Buy story, is where we hired one to tail a guy who was suing our client for an injury that wasn't entirely our client's fault. The guy was refusing to settle and was insisting on going to trial even though we offered a fair sum that would have paid his medical bills. The guy we hired got some good pics that showed the plaintiff was nowhere near as injured as he claimed, but the crown jewel of the photos was one where the guy was walking on a pier with a woman who wasn't his wife, had his hand on her ass and everything. Later, in a deposition, the attorney slid the picture to the plaintiff and said something like, "Mr. Smith, obviously not his real name, who is the woman in this picture. We would like to schedule a deposition with her as well." The guy went ghost white and told his attorney he wanted to settle. At least he was smart enough to realize that if his wife found out the other woman was gonna be deposed, he was gonna have to get a family law attorney as well, because the divorce papers would soon follow. My law firm had a bad faith insurance case several years ago. A guy had gotten hurt at work. He claimed he was disabled because he hurt his back and could not lift anything or really engage in any type of physical activity. His disability insurance carrier failed to handle the claim and pay him what was owed. There was a potential for relatively large damages. In fact, the carrier filed in the court case what is known as an offer to confess judgment. It's a way of agreeing to let judgment be taken for that amount. The plaintiff can accept the offer or reject. However, if he rejects the offer, he is responsible for the defendant's attorney's fees if the verdict ends up being less than the amount of the offer to confess judgment. The offer in this case was $750,000.0. He rejected the offer. A few weeks later, I found out that the plaintiff bowled every week. The guy got video of the plaintiff bowling and copies of his score sheets going several years back through the date of the accident. It was clear he really was not disabled. He also found that plaintiff had been in a car wreck and was making identical injury claims to the other driver's insurance carrier. We filed a motion with the court to dismiss the lawsuit based upon fraud and perjury. I never hired one. My husband is a private investigator and owns a pie business. I have also helped with some surveillance. So, very often, you do not find anything. There isn't anything to find. You have clients wanting to catch their spouses cheating, but they really aren't doing anything. Sometimes we realize that the client is mentally ill and very paranoid, so we can hook up cameras in the house. But no one is really moving the furniture around or stealing. I will tell you that if my husband really believes it's mental illness, he will not take the job or will cease the job once this is suspected. They need a psychiatrist, not a peon. He's not cool with taking money from those people. He worked on a pretty high-profile murder case. It involved several murders over a few years. My husband obviously knew a lot of inside stuff that never made it into the news. He found out a lot of interesting stuff there. He would read the web sleuth's forum about the case and laugh at the armchair detective.